There comes a moment when your soul whispers, enough, not because you stop caring, but because the people you cared for stop noticing. And that moment changes everything. Let me start by saying something many people are afraid to admit: being kind can hurt. Not because kindness itself is painful, but because people who haven't done the inner work will take your softness and twist it into something they can use, something they can step on, something they can drain. I've learned that being kind doesn't mean being endlessly available. It doesn't mean apologizing for things you didn't do, or offering explanations to people who never listen, or shrinking your truth just to make someone else comfortable. But for a long time, I did all of that because I thought kindness required sacrifice. I thought compassion meant surrender. I thought empathy meant absorbing the weight of everyone's expectations. I was wrong. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from loving people who only love the version of you that benefits them. They love your loyalty, but they don't honor it. They love your giving nature, but they don't reciprocate it. They love your patience, but they don't learn from it. And when they keep taking without giving, something inside you begins to fade. You start asking yourself questions you never imagined asking. Is my kindness invisible? Do they even notice the way I show up? Why do I feel guilty for wanting the same care I give so freely? And the heartbreaking part is this: you begin to feel wrong for expecting basic respect. But here's the truth: your kindness is a gift, not a currency. It's not meant to be traded or tolerated or stretched until it snaps. It's meant to be met with gratitude, with care, with conscious choice. And when people take it for granted, it's not a sign that you should become harder. It's a sign that your boundaries need to become clearer. Because kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It's self-betrayal, the silent erosion of self. There's a quiet moment, so subtle you almost miss it, when your kindness stops feeling like love and starts feeling like labor. It's the moment when you're halfway through doing yet another favor, offering yet another apology, giving yet another chance, and you suddenly hear yourself think, why am I the only one trying? That's where the erosion begins. It doesn't happen in grand, dramatic waves. No, it happens like water carving stone, soft, persistent, unnoticed by the very people causing it. Each time they dismiss your feelings, a little piece of you goes quiet. Each time they take without acknowledging, something inside you tightens. Each time they assume you'll understand, you'll forgive, you'll stay, your spirit grows slightly heavier. And because you're kind, deeply, authentically kind, you don't explode. You don't lash out. You don't demand credit or recognition. Instead, you try harder. You become gentler. You hope they'll see what you're doing. You hope they'll match your energy. You hope they'll finally say, I appreciate you. But hope can become a trap when it's tied to people who don't value effort. Slowly, you begin to feel like you're disappearing in your own life. Your needs get pushed aside. Your voice fades. Your desires feel selfish even when they're basic. You start believing that your comfort isn't as important as everyone else's. And that is the tragedy of unguarded kindness. It teaches you to prioritize others even when they've stopped prioritizing you. You begin to internalize the imbalance. You convince yourself that this is just how they are. You downplay the hurt. You excuse the patterns. You normalize the disrespect. And you tell yourself you're being understanding when in reality you're abandoning yourself in slow motion. The truth is, kindness without reciprocation becomes depletion. Kindness without boundaries becomes harm. Kindness without recognition becomes loneliness. But here's the powerful shift. Once you notice the erosion, you can stop it, because the moment you become aware of your own worth, everything begins to change. Why people mistake kindness for permission, there's something people rarely talk about. The world reads your behavior long before it hears your words. And when you're consistently kind, steady, patient, forgiving, generous, some people interpret that as permission to push your limits, permission to take without checking in, permission to assume you'll always say yes, but you never gave them permission. They simply took advantage of the quiet spaces where you hope they'd show respect. What most people don't understand is that kindness is not the absence of strength. It's the presence of restraint. It's choosing compassion even when frustration would be easier. It's showing up with softness in a world that rewards sharp edges. It's offering depth in a culture obsessed with convenience, yet some people twist tenderness into tolerance. They assume your silence means agreement. They assume your patience means approval. They assume your understanding means you don't feel the weight of their actions. They forget that kindness is a choice, not an obligation. And what happens next is subtle. They begin to test the borders of your generosity. A late reply becomes a habit. A small disrespect becomes a pattern. A broken promise becomes routine, not because they are inherently cruel, but because your kindness makes them believe the consequences don't exist. And here's the painful truth. People will treat you the way you treat yourself. If you allow yourself to be overlooked, they will overlook you. If you allow yourself to be silenced, they will stop listening. If you keep giving without pause, they will stop giving altogether. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But it also means the world mirrors the standards you set. And when you don't set any, people create their own, usually in their favor. The moment you realize this is the moment everything shifts, because once you see how your kindness has been misinterpreted, you can change the script. You can rewrite the narrative. You can reclaim your voice, your value, your limits. Kindness should never require your suffering. The cost of being the strong one. There's an unspoken expectation that settles on the shoulders of the kind-hearted. You're strong, you'll handle it. People say it like it's a compliment, but what they really mean is, I don't have to worry about your feelings because you always cope. And that is where the imbalance quietly grows. Because when you're the one who listens, who understands, who forgives, who shows compassion even when others give you chaos, people start believing your strength is infinite. They assume your heart has no breaking point. They assume your patience has no expiration date. They assume your emotional labor comes at no cost. But being the strong one is expensive. You're the one who holds space for everyone else, but no one realizes how lonely that space becomes when it's never held for you. You're the one who absorbs the tension in the room, who smooths the rough edges, who carries the emotional weight others drop. And after a while, even the smallest requests feel heavy, not because you don't care, but because you are exhausted from carrying what no one else acknowledges. And here's the heartbreaking part. People become so used to your resilience that they stop recognizing your humanity. They forget that you need support too. They forget that you feel overwhelmed too. They forget that you have limits, boundaries, emotions, fears, all the things they freely express but rarely consider in you. When your kindness becomes expected instead of appreciated, the relationship shifts. It becomes unbalanced, unequal, and you begin to feel like a utility instead of a person. You start questioning your worth outside of what you can offer. You begin to wonder if people would show up if you finally stopped. You fear that without your constant giving, the connection would crumble. And that fear keeps you quiet. It keeps you compliant. It keeps you giving long after your heart is running on fumes. But here's the truth you must hear. If being the strong one is slowly breaking you, then it's no longer strength, it's survival. And you deserve more than survival. When expectations replace appreciation, there comes a moment when you realize something quietly devastating has happened. People no longer appreciate your kindness. They expect it. At first, it feels small. Someone forgets to say thank you. Someone assumes you'll adjust your schedule for them. Someone asks for a favor without considering how it affects you. But over time, these small moments pile up. Gratitude fades, acknowledgement disappears, effort becomes invisible, and what once felt meaningful now feels mandatory. When people take your kindness for granted, they stop seeing it as a choice. They stop seeing it as an act of love, empathy, or care. Instead, they treat it like a responsibility you owe them, something automatic, predictable, guaranteed. Your yes loses its value because they've forgotten you have the right to say. No, the emotional shift is subtle but painful. You stop feeling appreciated and start feeling obligated. Yeah. You stop feeling seen and start feeling used. You stop feeling connected and start feeling controlled. And even worse, you start questioning yourself instead of questioning the imbalance. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I should just be more patient. No, you're not overreacting. You're responding to the ache of being overlooked. Because here's the truth. Kindness is only beautiful when there is recognition, reciprocity, and respect. Without those, it becomes emotional labor, a burden you carry alone. When people replace appreciation with expectation, they stop treating you as a person and start treating you as a resource, something convenient, something they can access on demand, and that is the slowest form of emotional erosion. When your goodness becomes a routine, they don't notice until it's gone. But the moment you feel this shift is also the moment your awareness awakens. It's the moment you begin to ask, What would my relationships look like if my kindness wasn't automatic? Who would stay if I stopped giving so much? And those questions are the beginning of your power. The moment you start losing yourself, in every journey of unreciprocated kindness, where the real danger begins, not in what others are doing to you, but in what you start doing to yourself. You begin to shrink. At first, it's subtle. You tone down your needs so you don't seem demanding. You soften your words so no one feels uncomfortable. You stop asking for help because you don't want to be burdened. And slowly, quietly, you start disappearing from your own life. Your identity becomes wrapped around being agreeable, helpful, reliable. You become the problem solver, the peacekeeper, the emotional anchor, roles you never volunteered for but somehow became responsible for. And the more you give, the less of yourself you feel. You stop recognizing the version of you that once had boundaries, preferences, opinions, and limits. Instead, you become someone who measures their worth by how useful they are to others. And that is where the true heartbreak lies. Being kind was never the problem. Losing yourself in the process was. The worst part, you don't even notice the shift at first. You tell yourself, I'm just being supportive. I'm just being understanding. I'm just trying to keep the peace. But keeping the peace on the outside creates a war on the inside. You feel resentful, but you swallow it. You feel tired, but you keep going. You feel unheard, but you stay silent. You feel unseen, but you try harder. It becomes a cycle of self-sacrifice, one people around you may never recognize because your suffering is quiet, dignified, buried beneath your desire to be kind. But here's the truth your heart already knows. If your kindness requires you to abandon yourself, then it is no longer kindness. It is self-erasure. And you deserve better than disappearing for the comfort of others. The moment you realize this is the moment the healing begins. The moment the boundaries start forming, the moment you whisper to yourself, I matter too, and that whisper, it becomes your turning point. The awakening, when your heart finally speaks up, there's a moment in every person's life, especially those who have given too much, stayed too long, carried too heavy, when something powerful awakens inside you. A voice you've ignored for years suddenly becomes impossible to silence. It doesn't sound angry. It doesn't sound bitter. It sounds honest. It says, I'm tired. It says, I need something too. It says, this doesn't feel like love anymore. This awakening often begins during the smallest, most ordinary moment. You're doing something for someone, something they didn't ask permission for, something they didn't appreciate, something they simply expected. And you suddenly feel a sting in your chest, not physical pain, emotional awareness, a realization that the scales have been unbalanced for far too long. It's the moment you stop pretending you're okay. The moment your body refuses to carry what your heart can't bear anymore. The moment you understand that kindness shouldn't cost you your dignity, your rest, or your emotional safety. This awakening is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not destructive. It is clarity. You begin to see the dynamics for what they are: imbalanced, draining, one-sided, not because you're unlovable or unworthy, but because you were never taught to protect your own heart with the same devotion you use to protect others. And then something shifts. You stop feeling guilty for expecting effort. You stop apologizing for needing respect. You stop offering more than people earn. You stop allowing inconsistency to disguise itself as love. This awakening is the birthplace of your boundaries. Not boundaries built from anger, but boundaries built from truth. Truth about what you deserve. Truth about how you should be treated. Truth about what your soul can no longer tolerate. And once this awareness rises, you cannot unsee it. You cannot unknow it. You cannot return to the version of you that accepted disrespect, disguised as connection. This is the moment your healing begins. This is the moment you reclaim yourself. This is the moment you decide that your kindness will be sacred, not exploited, reclaiming your power through boundaries. There comes a point where your love for others must stop overshadowing the love you owe yourself. And that point, the one you've avoided, postponed, softened, justified, is where boundaries are born. Not the rigid, cold, punishing walls people fear, but healthy, firm, self-respecting lines that say, my kindness is still here, but you will not misuse it anymore. When you finally choose boundaries, something extraordinary happens. You remember that your emotional energy is not an unlimited resource. You remember that your time is valuable, your presence is meaningful, your heart is precious. You remember that you exist for more than giving, fixing, rescuing, or absorbing. For the first time in a long time, you choose you. And yes, boundaries will upset people who benefited from your lack of them. They will call you distant, changed, selfish, difficult, not because you are any of those things, but because your growth disrupts their comfort. But remember this, people who truly care about you don't fear your boundaries. They respect them. Setting boundaries doesn't make you unkind. It makes your kindness sustainable. It protects the parts of you that were once exploited. It ensures that giving doesn't turn into depletion and compassion doesn't turn into a wound. A boundary is simply a declaration of your worth. I am not available for disrespect. I will not apologize for needing space. I deserve reciprocity. I choose relationships where I don't have to disappear to keep the peace. And when you speak these truths, not out loud, but within your soul, you reclaim power you never realized you lost. Suddenly, you stop showing up where your presence is taken for granted. You stop over explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop staying in situations that drain you more than they grow you. You begin to relate from strength, not fear, from clarity, not guilt, from self-worth, not sacrifice. Your boundaries don't push people away. They filter the wrong ones out. The shift. When people realize you're no longer the same, there's a moment, quiet but undeniable, when the people who once relied on your endless kindness suddenly feel something they never expected. Your distance, not the cold kind. It's not revenge, anger, or resentment. It's the distance that comes from clarity, from finally understanding that your heart deserves the same care you've always given to others. And when that shift happens, people notice. At first, they'll be confused. How come you didn't say yes? You're usually so understanding. What happened to you? But nothing happened. You simply stopped abandoning yourself. You stopped ignoring the exhaustion you carried. You stopped tolerating behavior that made you feel small. You stopped giving energy to people who never gave it back. And the truth is, the moment you pull your kindness back into your own hands, people feel the change because they were benefiting from the version of you that silenced your needs. Some will react with guilt. They'll realize they've taken too much. Some will react with frustration because your boundaries inconvenience them. Some will simply drift away because they were never connected to you, only to what you could give. But then something beautiful happens. Those who truly value you will rise to meet the new version of you. They will adjust. They will listen. They will treat your boundaries as invitations to treat you better. And you will begin to breathe again. You'll feel the weight you've carried start to lift. You'll notice how peaceful it feels to protect your space. You'll finally see the difference between people who love you and people who love your benefits. This shift is the beginning of emotional freedom when you no longer react from fear, obligation, or guilt. When you no longer trade your peace for acceptance. When you no longer let your kindness become a weapon others can use against you. This is the version of you that stands taller. This is the version of you that speaks clearly. This is the version of you that chooses respect over approval. And once you've reached this stage, there's no going back. The person you were, overgiving, over-explaining, over-available, no longer exists. You have stepped into your power. The ending, kindness reclaim, life transform now. Listen carefully, because this is the truth that changes everything. Kindness is not a weakness. It is a sacred strength. But strength without boundaries is not freedom. It is captivity. The moment your kindness is taken for granted is the moment your soul whispers, "It's time to reclaim myself." You've spent years pouring yourself into others, softening your edges, stretching your heart until it felt thin and worn. You've forgiven when it wasn't asked. You've given when it wasn't valued. You've stayed when you should have left. And yet, despite all that, you are still whole. You are still capable. You are still deserving of love that honors you as much as you honor it. The path forward is not about becoming hard. It's about becoming aware. It's about giving, but choosing wisely, loving, but with discernment, being generous, but never at the expense of your peace. Every yes you offer from this point forward should be an intentional gift, not an automatic expectation. When you reclaim your kindness, you reclaim your life. When you set boundaries, you reclaim your dignity. When you honor your own needs, you teach the world how to honor them too. And yes, some people will leave. Some people will resist. Some people will struggle to understand why you are no longer the same. But let me tell you this. The ones who truly belong in your life will rise to meet the version of you who values yourself. They will respect your limits. They will cherish your heart. They will honor your presence, not because you give endlessly, but because you give intentionally. Your kindness, once taken for granted, becomes powerful when it is sacred. Your heart, once overlooked, becomes luminous when it is protected. Your life, once shaped by others' expectations, becomes extraordinary when it is guided by your own truth. So step forward with courage, stand tall with clarity, speak with authenticity, and never forget you are not selfish for protecting your heart. You are human. You are worthy. You are enough. Kindness is your gift. Boundaries are your shield. And together, they create a life where respect, love, and dignity are no longer optional. They are inevitable.